Every day, millions of middle-class families wake up to a financial reality that feels like an unyielding mountain, growing taller with each passing year. What if every time you check your bank account, the numbers don't quite match the growing pile of bills? For these families, the cost of living is rising at an alarming rate, but wages and savings aren't keeping pace. Basic expenses, groceries, housing, utilities are all steadily climbing, forcing families to stretch their resources thinner than ever before. They're working harder, but the paychecks don't cover all life's demands. The struggle isn't just about surviving, it's about trying to preserve a way of life that's slowly becoming out of reach. As families adjust their budgets to accommodate skyrocketing costs, something unsettling happens. They're losing the small luxuries that made life feel easier. Can you imagine a life where taking the kids to the movies becomes a distant memory? What used to be a simple outing now feels like a luxury. Families that once enjoyed vacations, nights out, or just grabbing a coffee are now rethinking every expense. Dining out is reserved for special occasions, and even those are fewer. While some cut back on their leisure time, others are forced to pick up extra work, juggling side gigs to fill the gap. The weight of financial strain presses on them, turning what should be relaxing moments into stressful calculations. When it comes to basic needs like housing, the middle-class struggle becomes more pronounced. What if your dream home becomes a financial trap, leaving you shackled to debt and uncertainty? Rent prices have surged, making it almost impossible for families to save or invest in their futures. For those who've bought a house, the burden of mortgage payments is often the largest expense. With interest rates climbing and property taxes increasing, the house that once seemed like an investment now feels like a financial sinkhole. Families who were once proud of their homes now struggle to make ends meet, knowing that selling isn't an option with fluctuating real estate prices. The very place they call home is now a symbol of instability. Then there's the car payment, something many families rely on to get to work, school, and everything in between. Have you ever wondered if the car you drive is secretly draining your wallet every month? For the middle class, cars are more than just a mode of transportation. They're often a symbol of success. Yet, car prices continue to climb, and along with them, the cost of insurance, gas, and maintenance. Owning a car has become unaffordable for many, pushing families into debt or forcing them to make compromises. Car payments that were once manageable are now a monthly stress, and for some, the dream of owning a reliable vehicle is slipping further out of reach. But it's not just the physical costs that families feel, it's the emotional toll as well. What if the constant financial strain starts to take a real toll on your relationships? The pressure of rising costs impacts families in ways that go beyond the balance sheet. Arguments about money become more frequent. The simple act of budgeting becomes a battleground. Parents lie awake at night thinking about how to make their next paycheck stretch, wondering if they'll be able to keep their heads above water. Meanwhile, children grow up witnessing the stress, the anxiety, and the sacrifices. The emotional costs of living paycheck to paycheck often get overlooked, but they are a real and painful part of the struggle. With rising healthcare costs, the fear of falling ill or needing medical care becomes a haunting reality. What if a simple trip to the doctor's office ends up costing you more than your rent? Even families with insurance find themselves struggling with high deductibles, co-pays, and the rising cost of medications. The United States, in particular, faces an ongoing healthcare crisis that leaves millions of families vulnerable to financial shock. For many, the fear of seeking medical care is real, not because they don't need it, but because they can't afford it. Prescription drugs, once considered a necessary part of life for many, are now so expensive that families are forced to choose between filling prescriptions and paying bills. If you're finding this content eye-opening, don't forget to show your support. Hit the like button and subscribe to stay updated on more tips and stories about navigating the challenges of the middle class struggle. It doesn't stop with healthcare. The cost of education, whether for themselves or their children, has become yet another obstacle in the road to financial stability. What if your dream of sending your kids to college was crushed by the overwhelming burden of student loans? For middle-class families, the price of a good education is often too high to handle. Even public universities have seen their prices soar, and with the average student loan debt reaching alarming levels, Many families are faced with difficult choices. Some take on massive amounts of debt in order to help their children secure an education, believing it's an investment in their future. But once the loans are taken out, the impact on their financial situation is overwhelming. Meanwhile, the cost of childcare continues to rise, adding another layer of financial pressure for working families. Have you ever wondered how much of your paycheck disappears just to put your kids in daycare? Childcare has become one of the largest and most unexpected costs for parents, especially those who have no choice but to work full-time. For many families, the cost of childcare is so high that it nearly cancels out one parent's salary. In some cases, it makes more sense for a parent to stay home rather than pay for daycare, but staying at home also means sacrificing a paycheck. The cost of raising children in a world with ever-rising expenses is a complex puzzle, and the pieces often don't fit in a way that makes sense. As families cope with these rising costs, they are also facing an uncertain future. What if you're doing everything right, but is never enough? The dream of financial security slips further out of reach for many middle-class families, even as they strive to stay afloat. There's no clear path to getting ahead, just a constant cycle of hard work and financial strain. Every time families feel like they've taken a step forward, inflation, higher taxes, or unexpected expenses pull them 2 steps back. The future feels less like an opportunity for growth and more like a series of obstacles standing in the way of progress. Despite all these challenges, many middle-class families continue to fight back. Can the middle class ever escape the grip of rising costs? Or is this just the new normal? In a world where wages aren't rising fast enough to keep up with the ever-growing cost of living, many families are finding creative ways to cope. Some take on side jobs, others cut back on unnecessary expenses, and many work together as a unit, pooling resources and supporting one another. They are learning to adapt, but the emotional toll is undeniable. Still, amidst the struggle, there's a glimmer of hope. Families, though battered and bruised by the financial pressures of modern life, continue to persevere. The middle-class fight isn't over yet, but it's clear that something needs to change. Until then, families will keep finding ways to cope, one day at a time. Thank you for tuning in. If you found this insight into the middle-class struggle helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay updated with our latest videos on how families are navigating the rising costs of living. Stay connected for more real stories and solutions.